How's the video quality?
It looks pretty good. I'm waiting on it now. I just started the live video, so we're gonna see how it comes up on my phone here.
I'm
Um,
going to try moving a light. I see a lot of shadows. Just for grins, see if that's any better. I think it might be.
I know there normally is a delay on these from. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I think it just got started now. So we are live on YouTube now.
Okay. Well, hi, all.
All right, we'll wait on a couple people to get in here, and then I'll introduce you and basically tell people a little bit about you.
And you're recording this also?
Yes, yes. We're just gonna wait on some
So,
people to get in the room here, and
yeah.
then we'll.
So then the recorded version will be up on your YouTube channel.
Yes, yes. It will save as a video whenever we are
Mhm.
complete with it.
Are you mostly model builders on your channel?
Yeah, it's mainly a
Flyers,
bunch of
obviously.
modelers.
Hmm.
RC. Most people are on the foam side, so they've never really built like a balsa wood airplane before.
Really?
So
Okay. I
it's
guess foam
definitely
and
something.
fiberglass is the thing now, right?
Yep. Mainly foam. Just buying the. They have bind and fly models that you can pick up and just bind to your radio, and that's it. You know,
Hmm.
it's unreal. Little or no assembly required. So it's
I've
what
always been a builder.
have you?
I was always a pretty crappy flyer, honestly.
Well, hey, you know how to handle a chipmunk though.
Well, I learned, but when I was doing models, I mostly built. I built scale, and that's what I loved. I built
Hmm.
an ugly stick and basic stuff like that too. But I always crashed them.
Yeah, it's one good thing about foam now. It's easier to put back together than the balsa ones were.
Yeah, and I started with control line, which we called U control back then.
Hmm. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and introduce you because we got a couple people in the room here.
All
Ladies and
right.
gentlemen, this is Mark Meredith. He's a airshow performer, graduate of the Naval Academy, class of 1979, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And you flew as a bombardier on the A6s, didn't you?
That's right. Intruders
Intruders.
blew off a couple of different aircraft carriers.
So I guess we'll go ahead and you heard us talking there a little bit about models, and that's kind of how Mark got his start. So Mark, if you want to tell us a little bit about some of the models that you built as a kid.
Okay.
um,
Maybe I could start with just a little bit about my chipmunk, since that's really the reason I'm here, and then I could backtrack into models and how it related.
that sounds good.
So I'm sure most of you, if you build model airplanes, you know what a chipmunk is. Everybody knows Art Scholl's chipmunk. And I actually grew up uh, bike riding distance away from Flaybob Airport outside of Riverside, California, where Art Scholl was based. So I was a 13-year-old, so I had an early introduction to Art Scholl and chipmunks. But I wasn't a pilot, didn't become a pilot until I was retiring from the Navy after 29 years. So all of my career, I was either a right seater in the A6 or I was an aircraft maintenance officer and managed logistics and program management and whatnot. Retired as a captain. So when I was getting ready to retire, I decided, okay, now's the time. My kids were gone. I've got a little bit of money. I'm in a life transition. I broke down and finally got a pilot's license, and immediately got private instrument, commercial, and not too much after that got my flight instructor certificate. Um, Owned a couple of different airplanes, a Cherokee, a Bonanza, flew the Bonanza all over the place, did a lot of angel flights. But I wanted to learn aerobatics, and I wanted a project, because going all the way back when I was, starting at 8 years old, building model airplanes, first plastic and then wood airplanes. Um, I've always just been into building, and so I wanted to either build something like an RV or mostly I think I wanted to rebuild a classic aircraft. And so I was actually looking for a decathlon, which is kind of an entry level aerobatic airplane that a lot of you are probably familiar with, high wing. So it's a decent performer, but certainly not anything like unlimited class. And it's certificated airplane, so you can find a lot of them available for flight training as well. So that's what I was looking for. But I was shopping on the Trade a Plane site, and I saw this red and black, totally unusual, classic, vintage looking open cockpit airplane that turned out to be a Chipmunk. Um, Behind me here is what it looks like now, but at the time that I saw it for sale, it was red and black and configured as a two-seat tandem, and I just fell in love with it. And everybody told me don't buy that airplane, but I just had to have it. I put it off for about 6 months, and then it disappeared. Wasn't for sale anymore, and I thought, lost it. But then early 2009, it showed back up. Actually, somebody told me that they saw it at Sun and Fun with a for sale sign on it. So that was it. I called the owner again, and we closed the deal pretty shortly thereafter. I didn't want to lose it. So I bought it knowing it was a project because I didn't know anything about the history at that point, except that it was a Super Chipmunk and it needed a lot of work. And I loved chipmunks and I wanted a project. So I didn't even have a tailwheel endorsement at that time. So a friend of mine, flight instructor, we got on an airliner down to Florida, flew the airplane back home, got my tailwheel endorsement, various airports on the way back home, and back to Leonapolis in Maryland. And I expected it was going to be a flying project. Build a little, fly a little, and it turned out to be so much more. Mm-hmm. So I'll stop there and see if you got any questions, and I'll figure out where you want me to go after that.
Well, for one, we have one guy that asked if they used them as a trainer in Canada. I believe they did, didn't they?
They did. It's actually it's a DHC-1, which is de Havilland, Canada, and it was their first aircraft design. They actually designed it right at the end of World War II, 1946. So in 2016, we had the 70th anniversary of the Chipmunk. It was flying inside of 4 or 5 months after they first put pen to paper. Of course, that's what it was back then. The plant in Canada that designed it had been building de Havilland mosquitoes. I'm sure most of you know what that is. And war was over. They knew they were going to be losing their workforce, and they saw a bad need for another basic trainer for all of the British Commonwealth countries, Australia, Canada, Portugal, even Britain, obviously. And so the de Havilland Canada company designed it. They showed it to the parent company in Britain. They opted to build them as well. So as it turned out, they built 1,000 of them in England and 500 in Canada. And there's still a huge number of those 1,500 that are still flying literally all over the world. Because they were a British Commonwealth trainer, they made it to South Africa, they made it all over the world. And so mine was British built. You can tell the difference if you all probably know what Art Scholl's Chipmunk looked like with the bubble canopy. His was Canadian. So the pretty two-seat tandem bubble is the Canadian version, and then the Brits have one with a greenhouse canopy, sort of like a T6. So that's what mine was when it was built. So it was Royal Air Force, 1951 to 1955. And then Britain started, surprisingly, they had a great airplane, but they started phasing them out and transitioning to other airplanes. And so mine was shipped with a lot of other ones to Australia. Specifically, mine went to Tasmania, and it was in the Tasmanian Aero Club and flew as a club plane from 56 to 65. And I've actually been in contact with most of the people who've owned my airplane over the years, including the fella who now, he's old, but he's the historian of the Tasmanian Aero Club. So I spent a lot of time talking with him, and he sent me a lot of pictures of my airplane, including him flying it, picture taken in about 1960, and a lot of other flying photos of mine and members of the club, which I think is just so cool. So that's a little bit of the early history, and I can continue on.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, it sounds like that plane has quite a history. And you were talking about Art Scholl. Now, I know you used to. You said you rode your bike to the airport to watch him whenever you were a kid. Is that kind of where you got your love for chipmunks at, or is that
Well, it,
coincidence?
it was. And of course, I was 13 and I didn't really know anything about chipmunks. I just thought it was really cool. He had two of them that were based there. And those two now, one is hanging upside down in the Udvar Hazy Smithsonian Museum, and the other one's hanging upside down in the Oshkosh EAA Museum. So, he's a pretty famous guy, and anybody who knows chipmunks, they always remember Art Scholl because he's not the first to modify them as super chipmunks. There was a number of others, including a fellow named Pappy Spinks that probably prototyped it even before Art Scholl. Um, but he kind of made it famous in the late 60s, early 70s, and he continued flying his airplane until he died. Actually, when he was filming Top Gun, if you remember that movie, he had a he did air shows. He had a school, and he did lots and lots of movie flying, and so that was his claim to fame. Actually, a lot of claims to fame, and so starting in the late 60s, people started recognizing that, hey, this chipmunk is a pretty neat airplane. It flies really nice. It was built as a trainer, but it was a military trainer, so they built it tough. And, you don't ever hear about chipmunks coming apart or breaking, and they're just real sturdy. And, a lot of the airshow pilots who converted them into supers, they flew them hard. I heard somebody say that Art Scholl pulled 12 G's in his, which is just ludicrous to me, because that's what modern extras and MXs, the ones that are flying on the race circuit, they're pulling G's like that, and even not very much. They're more down in the 6, 7, 8 G's. So he worked his airplane hard, and he had problems with it. There was cracks and whatnot that they had to repair, but it held together. So he made it famous, and so then mine was, I'll back up to, remember it was in the Tasmanian Aero Club. It's 1965, and a company in mainland Australia bought it and turned it into a crop sprayer. So they took off that slider two-seat tandem canopy, threw it away, I guess, used it on another chipmunk, and put a chemical hopper up front, and then raised up the rear seat, put this big, tall, ugly bubble on the back, and hung spray equipment on the bottoms of the wings with all the controls for it sticking out the side of the fuselage. When I got the airplane, it still had the remains of the spray equipment and the holes in the fuselage and whatnot left over from that. But it still had the original engine, which was 145 horsepower, which is not a lot for doing crop spraying. Incidentally, it's got 280 horsepower now, so almost double.
If I recall, you put a didn't you put like a Edge 540 engine in it or something like that?
It's a Lycoming Thunderbolt IO 540 aerobatic engine, and it's the same engine that's on the Red Bull racers, with one minor modification. They had a slightly different intake system that wouldn't fit under my cowling, so it cost me 20 horsepower. So they have 300 horsepower in the Red Bull racers, and mine is 280. So anyway, Australia, then they turned it into a glider tug. They crashed it a couple of times, damaged the wing twice. It's got one of the two wings is new. Well, it was replaced. Let's say it's not new. And then in the late 60s, heyday of Art Scholl, even in Australia. So actually, the fellow who was the Australian national aerobatic champion bought 3 Australian chipmunks and imported them into the United States for conversion to super chipmunks. So mine came over and was re-registered in the U.S. as 7 Delta Whiskey. Um, the other 2 are still flying. They're 8 Delta Whiskey and 13 Delta Whiskey. And they all started life in Texas, but then they're kind of scattered to the winds. And mine lived a large chunk of its life as a super chipmunk in Texas, but doing shows, mostly in the South, in Midwest, West, and flew with, a lot of people that later made it kind of famous. And a fella in 1988 already had 1 chipmunk, and he had a partner who was an Iranian American. The 2 of them modified these 2 chipmunks so that they would match, and they made them open cockpit. So these are the only 2 open cockpit chipmunks in the world. And they did that because mine was single seat. It still had the chemical hopper up front that all these airshow pilots were using as a ferry tank. So it just had a little single seat bubble in it that looks sort of like a little small P-51 bubble. I mean, it was kind of a cool looking airplane, really. So the conversion is you clip the wings, so 17 inches off of each side. Then you lengthen the ailerons by stealing from the flaps. You put a big rudder on it to handle the extra torque, and then a bigger engine. So mine had 260 horsepower. And so it looks like a pretty significantly different airplane. And these 2 that they flew, Chuck Stockdale and Nadir Fong, were flying an open cockpit, formation aerobatic team. And, they were pretty big stuff for a few years. 88, they finally retired from airshow flying in 2000. So when they had these 2 airplanes, they went through all kinds of different iterations. They put the front cockpit back in so that they could fly the press. It had like 7 different paint jobs, and all of that paint was still on the airplane when I got it. It took me a year and a half to strip the airplane when I started rebuilding it. And let's see, what else did they do? I guess that's, the most of their mods. They broke it a couple of times. They actually broke the vertical stabilizer one time and had to limp home with it flopping back and forth. That'd be pretty scary. So mine has a steel fin post that's left over from that incident. So it's got scars from all kinds of different modifications, and it's had like 7 different engines on it that I can count. And so every new engine type got something else changed on the airplane. So I replaced the firewall as part of my rebuild, and when I took it off, it looked like it had been shot with buckshot. It had so many holes drilled in it. It certainly wouldn't have functioned very well as a firewall. So 2000, they finally retired from airshow flying, and it just kind of languished for about 9 years before I bought it in 2009. It had a little, it kept flying, but it wasn't flying much, and nobody was doing much with it, and it looked pretty sorry and kind of scary. And that's why, when I got a pre-buy inspection, the mechanic who looked at it said, "Don't buy this airplane. You really don't want it." But that just whetted my appetite and made me want it even more. I wanted a project. Look
at it now. You're putting it through its paces.
Yeah.
So, what engine did you have on it before the Lycoming that you just put on it? Because I know that was rather recent.
The fella who had it before me was actually the photographer for EAA. He flew their photo ship, and he did a few things to it, including new engine mount and new rubber fuel bladders, but nothing cosmetic. And he put a new engine on it as well, but it was not an aerobatic engine. It was an IL 540 off of a twin Piper of some description. and it was rated at 250 horsepower. And so flew with that engine for 4 years after I finished the rebuild. My rebuild was 5 years. It was 2009. I finished it in 2014. Flew at Oshkosh. Um, I had that engine taken apart and inspected and put back together because I didn't really trust it. And I honestly never really trusted it during the 4 years that I was flying with it. I was doing aerobatic competition, and I actually did my first year of airshow flying with that engine. And I wanted more power, more vertical, and something that I could. I was working it hard, even though I was self-limiting to 4Gs and I wasn't doing snap rolls or anything. Um, I was flying a lot of aerobatics with it. That was its mission, and it had the lightweight crankshaft, and so I made the decision to upgrade, and that's when I started looking for sponsors as well. So first
Mm-hmm.
company I asked was Lycoming, and so they helped me, and I sold my old engine. It's now in a F1 rocket, which is sort of a high-powered RV, and released it's in a F1 project. And so Lycoming helped me out, and then I got in uh, electronic ignition, and that company helped me, and a few others that I've picked up over the years as well. So I went from 250 horsepower with the engine that was on it when I got it. Now I've got 280.
I bet that's quite an increase, though. It doesn't sound like much, but I bet it's noticeable, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I wanted more vertical because
Mm-hmm.
you know if any of you know real chipmunks, full-size chipmunks, you know that they're not fast-rolling airplanes, even though it's got 8-foot ailerons. Uh, they're lengthened when they clip the wings by taking some chunk off of the flaps, but it's not a lot of cord on the aileron, and they, at cruise speed, it rolls about one roll per 3.5 seconds. So if you think about that, compared to your model airplane flying,
Yeah.
it's, or even to an extra or a Pitts, it doesn't even compare. So, but that's okay because you don't try to fly a chipmunk like an extra or a Pitts. You fly it like a chipmunk, which means big, graceful, um, and the slow rolling actually looks really good. It's a beautiful flying airplane, and I think a lot of people have a soft spot for chipmunks, and because mine is really a one of a kind now,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of stands out. And that's honestly the only reason I'm able to do air shows. It's not because I'm any hot stuff. I started flying when I was 47. It's because I've got this really beautiful flying airplane that people like.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a couple of RC modelers. There's a good many making models out of your exact airplane
Yeah,
as well that I've
yeah,
seen around on online.
yeah.
So it's pretty
Uh,
neat.
I'll call out Tom Series. He's well along on a 1/3 scale version of it. He modified a kit, and I sent him lots and lots of pictures. So, his is going to be scale competitive. Um, then there's a fella in Colombia who's building one, and somebody else in somewhere in Eastern Europe, I forgot. And there's a couple of smaller ones that are flying
Yeah, I see a
around
lot
the
of people doing
U.S. as well.
conversions, like from a normal chipmunk straight over to a super chipmunk. So it's quite
Yeah.
interesting. So getting back, we were gonna go to your Naval Academy experience. I wanted to find out what your experience was like at the Naval Academy.
Well, I was a 17-year-old knucklehead. I grew up at the Naval Academy. So, I was a physical science major. I, I wore glasses. So even though I would have loved to be a Navy pilot, that wasn't in the cards. So when I went there, I planned on being a submariner. And I actually did a midshipman deployment on a ballistic missile submarine in the Pacific. And I liked it. It was cool. But by the time I was getting close to graduation, I was planning on getting married, and I knew the kind of lifestyle that submarine officers have, and they're just not home much. And so decided, we're going air after all. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you one reason why I didn't want to be a backseater or a right seater was because my dad was career Air Force. He flew mostly multi-engine, KC-135, all the way back to the B-29. But he had a stint toward the tag end of the Vietnam War flying F-4s. And the F-4 pilots call their backseater the Gib, the guy in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not want to be a guy in the back, so I didn't go Air Force. I didn't want to be a guy on the right. So that's why I was going to go submarines. But I ended up as a guy on the right anyway. It was cool. Mm-hmm. A6 is a fabulous airplane if any of you know anything about it.
Yeah, I know we had one person ask earlier if you've ever had any weird night landings. Some people say there could be some.
No, not really. I only did it for a while in my 20s before I switched to aircraft maintenance and logistics. And I always had a lot of trust and confidence in the pilots that I was flying with, and I think I left Navy flying early enough that I didn't really have any real scary moments. I had a couple. Not anything that happened on the ship. I've got this thing that's popping up on my computer screen. Just a second
here. Real quick, we have one person in the chat that told me to read this to you. He said he told his boss, a Naval Academy graduate, 79 of 79, I guess, about you being on the show tonight, and he said he wouldn't remember a guy by the name of Don Quinn, even if the hook was on the middle wire. I'm not sure. Josh, did he remember? Yeah. Did he remember Mark?
So he was obviously a naval aviator. It sounds like the hook on the naval on the wire. He's talking about aircraft carrier operations.
Mm-hmm.
So I did ride carriers my whole career. You can see this is the Theodore Roosevelt behind me. Of course, Theodore Roosevelt's in the news now. But I actually did 2 tours on Theodore Roosevelt during Desert Storm and then again later on. And it's a wonderful ship. I was on the second tour, I was the aircraft maintenance officer, department head on the ship. And then, of course, this is an F-18 on the catapult over here.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's my Chippy.
There isn't nothing like Chippy.
David Eckert drew this, by the way. It's all computer design.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. If you look at that up close, you could blow that up to 8 feet across and it'd still be.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff online. I think I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Yeah.
So he said Quinn was a graduate that went on to become a
Quinn.
2-star.
Don Quinn. Oh, yeah. I know Don Quinn. Absolutely. I thought you said Flynn.
No, Quinn.
Absolutely. Yeah, Don Quinn was a friend. Good guy.
Yeah, he said he was on a carrier, and
I think I could be remembering this wrong, but I think he commanded a carrier.
Yeah, so apparently he's running a business now, or he's boss of one of the people that's in the chat right now in the live stream. So that's cool. Pretty neat coincidence.
Well, tell your boss Don hi.
You hear that, Mark? Or Josh? His name's Josh. So what did you do specifically after the Navy? After you got out of the Navy, what was your mindset on then? I mean, I know you said you wanted to get a pilot's license, and you did that real close to right after you got out.
When I retired, I still had kids in college, and I needed a stable income and all of that. So I worked as a Navy contractor for 9 years. My last 4 years on active duty, actually as a captain, I was on a project called Navy Enterprise Resources Planning. And I retired and I just stayed on that same project as a contractor for a few years and then transitioned over and I worked in logistics in the Pentagon. So, it's nice to be a Navy contractor for a while. It kind of helped set me up for retirement and funded all of my airplane adventures.
Mhm.
Because just at the same time that I retired, I started flying. And so it paid for my instrument and commercial, and I bought a couple, well, three really cool airplanes. The Piper Cherokee, that was my first air, Annapolis Flight Center. So I teach private instrument, commercial, other flight instructors, and love doing it. And my only goal is to break even between airshow flying and instructing. All I need to do is pay for my chipmunk expenses.
Mhm. So, can you tell us about the rebuild? So, once you got Chippy, how hard was it to rebuild that airplane from where it was when you got it?
Well, I didn't know what I was getting into, honestly. And would I have bought it if I had known? Yeah,
Mhm.
probably. Because all in all, it was a great experience, and in many ways, it changed my life because I just had, in the 6 years since I finished it, it's just opened up a whole world of people that I've met from all over the world, and competition flying and airshow flying, and just meeting people in all walks of the aviation community. Um, it's just meant so much. But there was a cost. That 5 years, it was 5,000 hours by my reasonable calculation. And so the first 3.5 years of that, I was working a day job, and I was still working 1,000 hours a year on it. And then I worked full time on it for another year and a half after that, after I left the contract. And so the first thing I had to do was actually what kicked off the rebuild for real was uh, I lost the right cheek cowl overboard doing aerobatics over the Eastern Shore.
Oh
It
man,
had crappy fasteners, and I knew they weren't great. I should have done something about it.
knew they
Instead, I was
weren't
flying
great,
the
but it was
airplane.
still flyable, still just enough to make it by, right?
Well, it was. Yeah, we made it back. My brother was in the front cockpit, and I was rolling out I was doing a Cuban 8, rolling out from inverted, and while we were in the roll, that's when it came off, and so it fell downward, and the roll made it kind of fall away from the aircraft as well. Otherwise, and I was pushing because of
Mhm.
being inverted, so that kept it from hitting either us or the tail. And I never even tried to look for it.
Yeah.
Some farmer probably eventually hit it with his tractor. Uh, so flew it back home, across the Chesapeake Bay, and the rubber baffling peeled loose from the top of the engine as well on our way home and whacked my brother in the head. Luckily, he was wearing a leather helmet. And it was on the right side. We landed with the right side pointing away from the rest of the field. So nobody saw it. And I was embarrassed, honestly, to
Mhm.
let something like that happen. So landed, taxied it straight into the hangar, closed the door.
There you
What do I
go.
do now?
Sigh of relief as soon as it's in the hangar.
Yeah, what do I do now?
Door.
It was a carbon fiber expert, and contacted him, and he agreed to make me a new cowl. So I gave him my top left cheek bottom, and he made these beautiful carbon fiber parts from them. First, he made female molds, then the carbon fiber. So I've got the female molds. So I mounted those with the original nose bowl that was really, really heavy and fiberglass that had been repaired many, many times, but it was still flat. And then I had to build a new right cheek for it. So that's where I dragged up my old model building, just ways of thinking anyway.
Mhm.
Um, so I built it like a boat over the top of the engine cylinders. I, I had a new carbon fiber left cheek, so I cut up the old one into sections to use as shape templates, and then I turned the shape templates into bulkheads essentially, and glued them to the inside of the drywall compound at the top of the airplane, brought it back to his shop and produced the part.
It's amazing. It sounds like
Then
everything
later,
you were doing was just like RCs, except at a larger scale. You know, using different
yeah,
sized wood and obviously drywall compound.
right. But of course, Tom Series has been using drywall compound over foam to make some of the parts for for this 1/3 scale chippy. So,
Really.
hey, it works.
Mhm.
And so that really kicked it off. And so that took a few months. And I thought I was going to get it back in the air. I did, and for a brief time in the summer of actually the fall of 2010. It took almost a year after I lost the cowling before it flew again. But I didn't like how the engine was performing, so I just said, okay, that's enough. I don't feel safe in this airplane. It was ragged. And every time you'd roll upside down, you had to hold your breath and close your eyes because there were so many paint chips. It was like this fine mist of paint chips that would rise up in the cockpit and hit you in the face. And I didn't know what was good, what was not on that airplane.
Mhm.
And the engine scared me. So I put it back in the hangar, and there it sat for another 4 years while I finished the rest of the rebuild.
Well, you can never be too safe. That's for sure.
Nope, nope. And you really would be surprised at how much I related back to my model aircraft experience, not just with the cowling, but just my approach to different parts of the rebuild. I had kind of a Navy aircraft maintenance mindset as well, but I probably almost everything that I did was I had to figure it out as I went along. It wasn't a kit plane. I wasn't restoring it back to a factory spec like you would on another vintage aircraft.
Mhm.
Uh, Instead, I was creating something new from this old, bag of junk. And most of what I had to do on the rebuild was removing all of the old past mods. Everything from when it was a crop sprayer to a lot of crappy work that was done by various people over the years. Had to rebuild all the flight controls, lots and lots of improvements to the inside of the fuselage, beefing it up. It's got doublers on the top engine mounts that go all the way back to the rear cockpit. You can see right here. So the doublers go all the way back, and because that's kind of a weak point, apparently a point where chipmunks tend to crack, and mine had been modified so many times that I think it was just severely compromised.
Mhm.
And then everything firewall forward, including the firewall, is new, and it's almost identical to Pitt's S2C firewall forward, other than the shape of the cowling, obviously.
That's interesting because of Pitts is such a different airplane. You would think it'd be
Yeah,
completely different. It's a lot smaller for
but
one, but
but it's an IL 540, and that's why the Pitts has such different performance.
mhm.
It's I don't know what a Pitts weighs, but it's mine is 1,600 pounds empty, and a Pitts is probably 1,000 at the most
Mhm.
empty. I'd be surprised if it's that much, honestly. And uh, let's see, other mods that I did. If you can see in the picture, this big turtleback, that wasn't there when I got it. Because remember, the stock chipmunk had a slider canopy, and that was long gone since 1965. So Chuck Stockdale, when he made it an open cockpit, he put this little tiny headrest that went back, kind of like what you might see on a Stearman.
Mhm.
It really was just a headrest, and it looked kind of funky. I thought it wasn't the right size, and it was totally non-functional. And the airplane had uh, no rollover protection. If any of you fly tail wheel airplanes, I know a lot of modelers also fly full scale. Uh, an airplane needs rollover protection, especially a tail dragger, because you could put it in a ditch, and the airplane is fine except it goes over on its back, and you fix the tail, maybe fix the wingtips, tear down the engine, put a new prop on it, and you're good to go. But meanwhile, if you don't have rollover protection, the pilot's dead.
Yep.
So I opted to make something useful out of that turtleback. So I sized it literally from the top of my head. Um, I sat in the cockpit with a ruler on top, and then had somebody measure from the top of the ruler down to the top of the fuselage, and that became my turtleback height. And it's stressed skin. It's just an 8 foot piece of aluminum with bent tabs on the bottom that are riveted. So I riveted one side, stretched it over the top, riveted it on the other side, and I already had a straight edge drawn so that I knew exactly where it was going to go. And so it was, you stretch it over, you drill the holes, rivet it, drill the holes, rivet it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's got a steel rollover bar inside it, and all of my Oshkosh camping gear slides back in there. I
Really?
just pull off the headrest. It's a leather headrest that goes on with snaps, and then poof, all of the camping gear is just little sausages anyway. They slide right back into that turtleback.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Put in camp for a week.
that's nice. Kind of like a Cub, how they have the tunnel in the back, and you just put stuff
Yeah,
back in there.
right.
So that's real interesting. I know you said, I believe you said some of the modifications you also took from Orion. Um,
Well, kind of the theme. Um, I'm glad you asked that question. I've always loved the Ryan STA. In fact, when I was about 12, I think I saved my allowance and I bought a SIG Ryan STA. Some of you may know what that looks like. Um, you, Even today, I think you still see that kit around. I've seen it on a lot of Facebook posts. It's people typically paint it white, red, and black with a black checkerboard on the bottom. And it was flown by a modeler named Maxie Hester. And it won like the 1972 National Scale Championship or something. And of course, that was about the time when I bought it as a young teenager. And so I worked on it. And this was a real serious scale airplane. And, I didn't necessarily have the skills for that, but I learned them. But I also never finished it. I got into high school and girls in track,
mm-hmm.
debating and whatnot, and so I got away from models. And when I left home to go to the Naval Academy, I don't know what happened to the model. Probably the same thing that happens to everything that you leave behind in your parents' house. But I never forgot it. And later on, when I was in my 30s, I guess, I was on a shore tour living in Northern Virginia, in Burke, and I had a little bit of time, and before I went back to sea in 3 years, so I found that they were still making that SIG Ryan STA, much to my surprise. Well, I bought it again, and I didn't finish it again. It's still sitting down in my basement.
Mm-hmm.
I worked on it for 3 years and got it pretty far along. I did panel lines using tape and filler, the same techniques that are often used today. I made a little template so that I could do uh, tight bond drop rivets, and it looks really good. And I was all set to do all of the it's covered. It's got paint on the fuselage, but went back to sea. Airplane went in a box, and I decided somewhere along the way that I could spend the rest of my life finishing that airplane. To get the scale details to the level that I wanted them, and so I decided I could probably rebuild a full-size airplane in the same amount of time that it would take me to build a real champion scale model.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that attracted me to the Chipmunk when I saw it for sale was that it looked like a Ryan STA. The tail's different, the shape of the cowling is obviously different, but it just had that look, that 1930s vintage look. And then as a single seat with the turtleback, it looks like a vintage racer. So that's what grabbed me. It was the resemblance to the Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I loved it when I took off from Oshkosh for the first time. Nobody knew what the heck the airplane was. They still don't. I had to write Super Chipmunk on the nose and a Mean Vicious Chipmunk on the tail so that people would figure it out. So the tower controller, he's standing on a box at the end of the runway shooting people off to go home. And he said, "Blue Racer, cleared for takeoff."
I bet that made you feel pretty good.
Oh, it did. Oh, it did. But of course, there was a Cessna 182 on the other side of the runway. You know, we were taking off side by side, staggered.
Don't say he beat you.
And well, I kept it pedal to the metal, and he took off 5 seconds ahead of me, and I slowly, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. I finally passed that 182.
Mm-hmm.
Just about the time I did, a P-38 Lightning went whoosh right over the top of me. Okay, all right. It looks fast, but a Chipmunk is a draggy airplane, especially with open cockpit. So it looks fast sitting still, but the reality is it's not.
Mm-hmm. Somebody asked in here. They want to know how much weight can a chipmunk carry? Like how much can it fly with? Get off the ground safely with.
Well, the max gross weight is kind of owner selected, really, because it's experimental. But I call it 2,100 pounds, and with a 1,600-pound airplane, so that's about 500 pounds. And honestly, I don't think you could put that much weight in it because it only carries, well, maybe if you had a really big guy in the front, because it carries 22 gallons of fuel, which isn't much. So the range is really short. And then you can put lightweight things in the turtleback and two pilots with parachutes. So I weigh about 170, maybe 10 pounds of parachute. If you put a similar sized guy in the front, maybe he's up to 200. It's not a lot. And then there's no more room. It's got a smoke tank also, so that's about 7 gallons. So that's what, another 40 pounds.
Now, as far as the smoke tank goes, do you take that out whenever you put the front seat in, or can you still have the tank in there whenever you have a front passenger in?
The front passenger straddles the tank.
Okay.
So the tank was sized and positioned so that it wouldn't get hit by the front stick.
Okay, so there's just enough room.
It's right there in front of the front stick.
Okay, and then you have a cover that you put over that for air shows, don't you, to make it
right.
Make it a
it's actually
seater?
Configurable a lot of different ways. When I first finished it, I completely finished the front cockpit. It's got full flight controls. It doesn't have any electrical, and it's missing some of the gauges. It's got the basics. It's got a throttle, stick, rudder pedals, altitude, airspeed, etc. But then I ran out of time. I wanted to get to Oshkosh, and so I made a solid skin and just put it over the top. I hadn't even made a front windscreen yet. And so that's how it went to Oshkosh the first time. And then the next winter, I made the new front skin with the hole and the combing and made a front windscreen. So then the next year that I went to Oshkosh, which is when it won the Lindy Award, it was configured as a two-seater. And so it's still convertible. 88 screws, pop off the forward skin, put in either the solid skin or the tandem skin, and you're good to go. And then I've also got you could call it a tonneau cover, that for a quick turn, I can just unscrew the windscreen, which is really fast. And in 15 minutes, I can put that tonneau cover down using the windscreen holes, and I'm ready to fly it as a single seat.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like I saw something look like almost a convertible top. It was a rag top or something that goes on the front seat.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling the tonneau cover. It's just a hunk of leather that with eyelets on the outside where I can screw it down. So it takes 15 minutes to switch it over. So I could fly to an air show or a competition or something with a front seater, pull and the tonneau cover rolls up, and throw it in the turtleback. So I could just unscrew the windscreen, put that down, and now I can fly it as a single seat. It flies much better as a single seat because that front windscreen creates a huge amount of drag and turbulence. It's noisy. The air rolls right off that front windscreen. It comes right back and hits me in the back. And so it's kind of pressing me forward. I have to kind of push back against that air. Controllers can't hear me. They're always saying, "Say again." You need to fix your radio. There's nothing wrong with my radio. I'm open cockpit. Sorry. What?
Yeah.
So you don't even have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've started doing, even as a single seat, they don't hear me very well. Whenever I need to call the controller for the first time, I make sure I'm as high as I want to be. I pull the power to idle. I call them up, get my transponder frequency or whatever. Then I put the power back in because it's the engine that makes all the noise. It's not the slipstream.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like you got it figured out then. As far as being an open cockpit and trying to make radio calls, I've heard they're a little bit sophisticated. I've ridden with some people, with a person in a Cub before, with the doors open, just the doors open, and I've got a headset on. And I can still hear him screaming behind me to try and talk to the tower. It's kind of funny, but
Yeah, yeah. And they can hear my front seater better. And the front seater has a push to talk switch too. So if they're a pilot and they know how to talk on the radio, I'll just have them do the radio. It makes it easy.
and that's how it works. So I know I gave you an invitation already to our Warbird event at the end of July, but one of my friends in here wanted to know if you can come to our barn burner shootout. It's an aerobatic air show in June.
That's what you invited me to last year.
Yes.
And I really would love to. I didn't last year because there was some conflict. It might have been an air show. I can't remember. But I would love to try to do it this year, and especially, if you all are meeting, because, you might still be social distancing too.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, don't know if there's going to be an air show season.
Yeah, it doesn't. Sounds like everything's gonna be online, live air shows, but
Yeah. And of course, Colin, that we had the two different online air shows. So Chippy and I participated in those. If any of you wanted to look them up, just find it on YouTube or Facebook. Look under Socially Distant Air Show, and it was actually a 3-day event. So we are on the third day, actually right before the Thunderbird. I honestly didn't think they were going to have time for me, but because it was mostly jets and jet teams from all over the world.
yeah, I know that one was a little bigger than Chef's turned out
big.
to be.
And it was almost all big names. And, I'm a small air show guy, at least at this stage in my career. I've been doing air shows for 2 years. I was really pleased. I tried to make a good video, and they showed it and really talked it up.
Well, it looked good. You might get some new contracts next year then. I said you might get some new contracts next season then, just based on that socially distant air show.
That's what I'm hoping. It was a good marketing event, probably for you too, because you got to participate in the Chef Pitts.
Yeah, for the opening. He said I was 12 years old, but it's only what, a 9-year difference?
How old are you really?
19.
Okay.
So.
It's a little old.
Yeah, it's a little old.
You've done an awful lot though with modeling. As a 19-year-old, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I started when I was 8 years old, on the buddy box, and so I've been doing it ever since.
You're doing shows and, not just model events, but full-scale air shows, and you got that trailer that you haul around, and you fly them off, so, good on you. My hat's off to you.
Yeah, thank you. So, another person wanted to know where you're from, where do you live at?
Well, the Air Force. I was an Air Force brat, so I kind of lived all over the place. Most of my growing up that I remember was in California, in Merced, in the San Joaquin Valley, and then in Riverside, where Playbob is, and Shoal. But then when I was 13, we moved to Pensacola, home of naval aviation, and went to 9th grade there, and then Selma, Alabama. That's where I graduated high school. So then I went to the Naval Academy out of Alabama. My wife's from Alabama, so I met her there.
And where are you currently staying now? Where's your current place? I know you're fairly close to us. You're about 2 hours, I believe, near Annapolis.
Well, I live in Rockville, just north and a little bit west of D.C., between D.C. and Baltimore. But my airplane is in Annapolis, actually the town of Edgewater, but it's Lee, Annapolis, Maryland, right there on the Chesapeake Bay. I actually lived there for 10 years when I was a Navy contractor and commuted in to the Pentagon, et cetera, from there. But my wife is a pastor of a United Methodist Church, so she was moved to Rockville United Methodist, and so she followed me around in the Navy, and now I'm following her.
Mm-hmm. And you are, I don't think we've talked about this yet tonight, but you're a flight instructor at the Annapolis. What's that called again?
Navy Annapolis Flight Center.
Mm,
So I'm wearing the shirt. So Navy Annapolis Flight Center. So it looks like Naval Aviation Wings with a Naval Academy crest on it. And it's a great school. It's not directly associated with the Navy or the Naval Academy, although it used to be. So it's a private school that probably about half of our students are active, retired, or former military, but the rest of them aren't. And they may be hobbyists or 19-year-olds aiming for the airlines. And I teach students of all ages, and I've taken a number of people all the way from their first flight in a little airplane, all the way up through flight instructor, and then been hired as an airline pilot.
mm-hmm. So that's what you mainly do now, isn't it? That's what your main work is now.
Until the
Outside of.
middle of March, it was, and
Mm,
I started social distancing, so that gave me an opportunity to do a lot of maintenance and improvements to my chipmunk. Actually, I don't have the income of flight instructing, unfortunately, but we're doing all right with that. And so I got the annual done, uh, remade some parts that were kind of ragged, like the strut fairings were cracking, and I didn't like the way they were made, and they weren't very aerodynamic, so I remade those. And then I added wingtip smoke. I'm actually going to be debuting the wingtip smoke tomorrow.
oh,
I'm
really?
doing a gender reveal at Leonapolis. So, just working with the dad, I got blue and pink smoke, and they hang from either wingtip, and they're trigger fired.
Mm-hmm.
So I can do, there's a rotary switch, so I can do one, so it'll fire one on each wingtip. Go to two, fire two more. Go to three, fire two more. So for air show flying, I'll use mostly white, but then I'll have kind of a finale using red, white, and blue smoke.
Yeah, that'll look really good. That'll
And then
be
of course it's
interesting.
got the exhaust smoke out the middle.
Mm-hmm. Nothing like a big plume. I know I've looked at some photos over the past couple of.
Yeah, yeah. It really shows when you're slow. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm never gunning the power, uh, except when I'm doing a spin. Sometimes not even then. The power never comes off. It's full throttle and it stays there the whole time.
So we have another person that asks how many graduates versus how many start in flight school, or how many graduate versus how many start in flight school. How many people
You
actually
know,
make it through?
uh, I appreciate that question. And sometimes you hear pretty lousy numbers, um, like maybe 70% attrition. I don't believe those numbers. I stay pretty close to the whole flight training industry, and I'm friends with a lot of flight instructors, and Facebook friends with flight instructor communities all over the country. And I don't think it's that bad, really. I know our school, there's very few people that don't finish once they start. I've never, well, I shouldn't say never. I've had two students who didn't finish, uh, mostly because there's kind of an age where if you're past a certain age, it's hard for you to just build those brain connections. You can be old and continue to fly, like Bill Finnegan. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
my next door hangar neighbor is in his early 80s, and he still teaches aerobatics. He was doing air shows until very recently. People come to him from all over the world to train with him in the pits, and he's 82. But learning to fly when you're 65 is a whole different story. It's like if you've never been a musician, you decided I'm going to learn to play the banjo
Yeah.
at 65. Good luck with that. Yeah, you could probably do it, but you may not ever be good.
Yeah.
And it's not enough as a pilot to just be okay. You need to be good,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only way that you're going to be safe. And so the only people that I've, in almost 6 years of instructing that I haven't had finished have been two older students that decided, yeah, I always wanted to do this, but maybe this isn't for me after all.
Well, that's good to hear that it's not people that can't actually, complete the course. It's people that just change their minds,
Yeah.
halfway through. At least that's what it sounds like.
And even then, see, there's something about that. I wonder how many of your listeners are pilots or aspire to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As I know, I don't think many of them are pilots. I know everyone's an RC pilot, but
Yeah, and so and a lot of your listeners, I think, are probably younger. If you're younger and you've been doing RC, and maybe you got some simulator time, you're not gonna have any trouble. None, zero trouble. You got to have the financing lined up because it costs. Even if you're young and whizzing through it, it's going to cost you probably $10,000 to get a private pilot certificate, and then you got to continue flying after that
hmm
in order to stay proficient and safe.
and I've heard if you want to go even further with it and get different classifications and ratings, then you need a lot more money than just the
You,
ten
you
thousand.
do, but people who kind of fall into two categories. Honestly, there's variations on the theme, but they're either 19 and they want to be an airline pilot, and so they're going through community college aviation program and they're flying with us. So they get an associate's degree, they become private instrument commercial flight instructor, they teach for a year, get hired by the airlines, and they're gone by the time they're 20. We've had lots and lots of people that fell into that category, and so they get loans. They have, you know, their parents helping just like they would any other college program. And the whole program might cost them 50 or 60,000, honestly. But you if you play it right, you can get it done quicker than that. But a college is going to cost you that
Mm-hmm.
much. So that's kind of the first category. They're either young or else they're, maybe they even went to college somewhere and they started a career doing something and they didn't like it. And they decided, I always really wanted to fly. If I'm going to do it, I better do it now.
Mm-hmm.
And so they start training, they line up the money, sometimes it's with student loans, and then they go do it. Or else they do 4 or 6 or 8 years in the military, and now they've got VA benefits, and that gives them a full ride.
Yeah,
They
I
take you
know.
all the way up to flight instructor.
Right near where I'm at right now, out at Martinsburg, I think they're where they fly C-17s, so they fly heavy jets out of there. But it's the Air National Guard. I think they're looking for like 50 pilots right now, and it's kind of
Yeah,
ridiculous. You join, they send you to school. You
yeah,
get paid when you go, and you don't have any debt. So it's other than
uh-huh.
you commit to a certain amount of years of service, but that's guaranteed.
Yeah. And my flight instructor for getting my flight instructor certificate, I was also already commercial rated and had an airplane and all of that, but you got to teach instructors too, just like I teach instructors now. So my instructor to teach me how to teach was 22. She went through the aviation program at University of North Dakota, which is a great big program, and she got her CFI as part of that 4-year program, and then she was teaching with us. Uh, so she taught for 2 years, I guess, and then she got picked up by the Air Force, and she's flying F-16s.
Mm.
Pretty cool.
That's interesting. It shows all 4 year schooling, or
Yep,
just a good schooling is all it really takes. We had
yep.
one person ask, they wanted to know what cutoff age do you recommend as far as getting your pilot's license? What's the oldest that you would?
Uh, I'd say if you're not working on it by your upper 40s, you're pushing it. You're fine up until then. I was 47 when I got mine, and I feel like I was right on the outer edge. I built models. I had a career in the Navy. I was around airplanes my whole life. I was a right seater in the A6. I was a logistics guy. I rode carriers. um, but I wasn't a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And learning to land and just learning the stick and rudder skills as a pilot was not easy for me. And but what you find is once you build those brain connections, make those synapses, then that forms a foundation, and you can layer additional skills on that without too much trouble. So instrument was easy for me. It's probably my A6 Bombardier Navigator time. Commercial, I struggled a little bit more because it's mostly additional stick and rudder skills. You wouldn't think that, but it is. And flight instructor was easy. And then learning aerobatics. I learned aerobatics, first of all, with Bill Finnegan and his pits, but probably most of what I know I learned in my chipmunk. And and I haven't ever had an instructor in the airplane with me. It's all been ground coaching.
Really?
Because that's typically the way it works with aerobatic competition. So, you learn enough to be safe so that you're not going to kill yourself, and then you've got people on the ground who are downgrading you on scores and giving you debriefs and tips and tricks, and you gradually just grow your skills, including your situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with flying a model aircraft, you've got a certain amount of situational awareness you got to have because the airplane's coming at you, and so left is right and right is left. Your brain has to be able to make those reversals. And
Yep.
if you're upside down in an airplane, you know, things look different. And so you, most airshow pilots learn their skills in competition so that you can step it up slowly. It starts with, the entry level where it's basically just loops, rolls, spin, cubinate. That's about it. And then you go to sportsman level, which adds a few more maneuvers, a little bit more difficulty, but there's still no snap rolls, no outside maneuvers. And then you go to intermediate, and there's more outside maneuvers, outside snap rolls, inverted spins, that sort of thing. And then advanced, where it starts getting really serious. And if you can't take 5 negative G's and have an airplane that'll take 5 negative G's, you don't belong in that category. You don't find airplanes there that can't. You don't find pilots there that can't.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, there's unlimited, and probably no more than 10% at most of all of the competition pilots around the country ever reach the unlimited category.
Yes, I know we have, in the RC world we have IMAC, which is the International Modelers Aerobatic Club. So it's International Miniature Aerobatic Club. That's what I meant to say. But
Okay.
it's basically the same thing. We have beginner, sportsman, intermediate, and advanced. And then we have I forget what they're called. They're unknowns that we fly. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, you have that in full-scale competition as well. In the primary and sportsman, there's no unknowns. But once you go to intermediate, then there's 3 flights in a competition. So there's your known that everybody flies every contest, and then your own that you designed. It's called freestyle, and so it still has to meet very specific criteria. So it's really hard to design a good freestyle sequence because it's so restrictive. And then an unknown, and so then they can pick anything out of the whole repertoire for that category, and you are given that sequence the night before so that there's no opportunity for you to practice it, and then you fly it the next day.
mm-hmm.
Sight unseen.
That's I think that's the same way that IMAC goes. I haven't flown or competed in IMAC in a while. I think last time I competed was 2013, and I wasn't that good. I was in the basic category, but everybody starts somewhere, and from
Yeah.
from
So
here to there, it
let me
just
ask
has
you
an
a question,
interesting look.
Colin. How do you see, you do a lot of air shows, right?
Hmm. Good many.
How do you see air show flying versus competition in models?
Um, it's a lot different in models with competition. Like we have XA, which is extreme aerobatics, and that's basically stuff that real airplanes can't do.
Yeah.
There's G forces that we put on the airplanes that's just not.
Hovers.
Yeah, hovers and rolling Harriers on the deck. Those are probably they aren't they aren't as strong. Like they don't use a lot of G's as much as some of the tumbles that we do. Like when I do a knife edge spin that's coming around so fast that I can barely see the airplane going around, if that was a real airplane, that it probably would be in pieces by the time it got to the ground.
Yeah.
So it's
My chipmunk won't do knife edge spins, by the way. I was
really.
experimenting with it the end of last week and tried and tried. He just says, nope, not going to do that.
Now, can you hover it?
Huh?
Can you hover the chipmunk? Will it hover?
Oh, heck no. No, no, no. To hover anything, you got to have a 1-to-1 power to weight ratio. And the
Mm-hmm.
chipmunk is nothing close to that. There's
Really?
very few air show airplanes in the world that can do that. You see the Jet Waco, Sasquatch can do it, and there's been some other, biplanes that they hang jet engines under.
It seems like.
And then a very few, big horsepower carbon fiber monoplanes can do it or get close to it. But, all the rest, you run out of energy.
Yeah, I think some of the new MXSs can do it as well as like Sean Tucker, his pits, and uh, Skip
I'm not
Stewart.
even sure his will do it. I think it gets close.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, there's just a whole
And
different level of difference between aerobatic, like full size airplanes and models, just
yeah,
in the G
yeah.
forces alone. The power to weight ratio on my new slick that I have. It's almost out of sight. So I've got way more power than I know what to do with, and it just
Well,
shows how
I put
light they
that
are.
extra 30 horsepower in my chipmunk because I wanted more vertical.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm successful. I got what I aimed for, but in order to get one vertical roll, that's all I wanted. I have to dive 1,000 feet, roll out at never exceed speed, heart pull to vertical, and instantly start rolling. If I wait 2 potatoes after I get vertical, um, I just threw away a quarter turn.
Really.
And so as soon as I hit it, I aileron full to the stops, and I start rolling. And then I can just barely finish one vertical roll, and then it's all out of juice. So what I do, this is actually my opening maneuver. I roll in, 45 down, hold that, roll out, pull vertical at my floor, and at never exceed speed, pull vertical, one roll, push over just a little bit at the top, then stick to the far right or the aft right corner with full left rudder. So I've got right aileron, left foot, stick in the back corner. So
Mm-hmm.
it finishes the roll, it kind of drops the nose, and it goes straight into a accelerated power on spin. I get 2 turns out of it, and then I'm at my floor again and pull on.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. Looks good.
That sounds neat. That's something I want to do is get into full scale flying as well, and it's kind of something I'm excited for. I've had a couple of people that want to help me out with training and stuff, so
Yeah.
it's
Well,
from
come
what
over
I've
to
heard.
Lee. We'll go flying in my chipmunk.
Oh, that sounds like a great time. I'll take you up on that offer.
Sometime later in the summer when we're not social distancing anymore.
Yep, yep, definitely. If anybody else has any questions, I'm gonna see if I missed any in the chat here. Oh, I know. Somebody said earlier they wanted you to bring your Ryan to the barn burner if you come. So
I don't know how I get it there. If I'm gonna just fly overhead in my chipmunk.
yeah, It depends. I mean, well, would it fit back your tunnel in your chipmunk, or would it behind
Uh,
the?
Not without beating it to
Oh, jeez.
death. Nothing goes back there except soft things.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, somebody
So,
said bring
but
it.
but thanks for suggesting that. I really ought to finish it, but I just don't know when I would do it. I'm having so much fun in the chipmunk, and it's sucking up all my time.
Mhm.
And I love projects. Whenever the FAA says I can't fly airplanes anymore, I'm going to go back to model building, no doubt about it.
Yep.
And it'll be probably scale 30s classic airplanes, World War One.
Yep. That's when you need a VQ warbird or a Legend hobby. Help Colin out a little bit here. And
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I got to build them out of balsa wood.
well, yeah. Well, we sell kits too. They sell kits too, so it is. It might not be a scratch built, but it's something. Oh, okay, my friend Jackson from our club, he said just bring himself. So he said as long as you
Just
just
bring
bring
what?
yourself.
Ah. Well, I seriously will do my best to show up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand it's close to Hagerstown. And so what we talked about last summer was ending do a few low passes and whatnot, and then land at Hagerstown. And then you all would send somebody to pick me up and hang
Mm-hmm.
around for the rest of your air show. Should be great.
Yeah, I know he. We talked about you coming and signing autographs because we tend to have a good general public presence there, smaller kids,
Okay.
younger kids. So
Yeah. Well, I've got hero cards. It's part of being an air show guy. So I can bring those and sign them for the kids. That's
mm-hmm.
always everybody's favorite. Well, it's not their favorite part of an air show. That's the flying.
Mm-hmm.
But once they get back on the ground, people just love talking with the kids and anybody else who walks up and wants to talk airplanes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what Chef Pitts when he messaged me. He's like I didn't get a hero card from you yet. Can you send me one? Like what's a hero card? I had no idea what they were. I've never heard them being called that before, but you
Yeah.
know. But I
It's
guess
an
I got to come
autograph
up
card.
with one now.
I thought I might have one here. Yeah, I don't have one in this room.
I've got
I'll show it to you.
yeah, we've yeah, something like this. There's chefs.
Yeah, there you go. Yep, yep. That's Chef Pitt's card. So mine is same idea, different but same idea.
hmm
About that size, 5x7, I think.
So
And then
yeah,
you just leave room on it to sign it.
yeah. But I know whenever I've done the full scale shows, I've done Leesburg, Manassas, and Culpeper in the local area, and then I've traveled for some big model shows up in New York, and I'm going to Texas this September for one. But
Wow.
there's been some kids there that've come up and wanted me to sign something or ask for an autograph. So it is something that I think I should get
Yeah.
get down.
It doesn't cost that much. When you think about everything else that you're spending on models, I know how much that is. You spend $100 for a big stack of Kinko's, FedEx cards, and that'll last you a while.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's an important part of being an ambassador for aviation. And that's one of the great things about air shows is that it almost always does start with modeling. And then it goes to the flight school, if there is one there on the field, the the warbird trainers, and then it gradually steps up. So airplanes like my Chippy will usually be in the middle of a show,
Mm-hmm.
and then you know then it'll be somebody like Scott Francis and the MX that would follow me, and then maybe end with a P-51.
Or Art Knowles. But
Yeah.
you haven't thought about buying a Harrier, have you? Have you, Mark? I
I
know they're for
understand he's got a
sale.
couple of them for sale.
Yeah, I think he's selling all of them. He said he was getting out of the air shows, so he might not. He might actually. I know last year he talked about it, but then he ended up flying again. So we'll see what happens. He says he starts
My
it up for 11 seconds
chief
and
pilot in
has.
my flight school was a Harrier pilot, and so he's very much the retired Marine, and that's the way he runs the school, which actually is what makes it such a great school.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty neat. We there's another naval guy in the chat watching, Dave Marshall, the RC Air Marshal on YouTube. He's got a RC channel, so his regards have been sent.
All right.
If you want to go back in later, we'll have the video will be published on my channel, so you'll be able to go in there and see the live chat, what people were saying, and those type of things as well.
I look forward to that.
So one of the guys on here said to let you know that he was airborne in the Army, but afraid to fly a plane until flew model planes. So. Okay, now everybody's telling you to buy a Harrier. It might be. I don't know. That takes some money.
I would have had to work as a Navy contractor for way more than 9 years to afford a Harrier.
Mm-hmm. Or get into real estate. But,
yeah.
You know how it is. All right, well, if anybody else has any questions, now would be the time to ask them. I know Farmer Man's getting ready to go on at 8:30, so...
I had a list of things I was going to talk about. Let's see if I left anything out. Most common question that I get, what is it? Nobody can tell what my airplane is. I'm planning on putting a bubble canopy on it.
Oh, are you?
That's my next big project. So it'll be a slider, sort of like a Spitfire.
Oh, that'll be nice.
But it'll still be convertible, so I can fly it open cockpit, which seems to be kind of a crowd favorite, and it was for me too.
So
I wanted an open cockpit.
When you do that, will you just take the glass out, or is that when you fly to open cockpit? Will you slide the glass back, or will you just take it out completely?
No, it'd be those same 88 screws. I just convert over the whole top of the airplane to completely different configuration.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Mark, do you have anything else to say?
No, I think that you covered a lot. So, good questions. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate you being here tonight.
Your followers.
I know they definitely enjoyed it. Everybody in the chat was real excited to talk, kind of one-on-one with the Airshow performer for once. And I think next week I'm going to have Clemens Kulig on here, Chef Pitts.
Oh, great.
So I
look forward to seeing that.
I'm going to try to keep a weekly thing going on.
I don't know how much of an Airshow season there's going to be left. Oshkosh is already canceled. They canceled that this morning.
Yep.
But I'm scheduled to fly at the NAS Oceana, Virginia Airshow, which is a big one.
Oh, really?
That's in the fall. So I'm hoping that that's far enough out that they won't cancel it. So
yeah, hopefully it'll be going.
For me to get that show.
I know our state's opening back up now, so we're starting to open up again. So I get to go get my hair cut on Monday morning, and I'm pretty happy about that. So if you guys know NAS Oceana too, this will be one of the last years you get, or this will be the last year you get to see the Blue Angels flying the jet that they've flown for 30 years now, 35 years. So
I'm not sure how long. It's been a while.
Yeah, but they're switching to Super Hornets next year, so that'll be the end of the Legacy Hornet, as far as the Navy knows. But
most people won't know the difference, if they're not.
Unless they hear the whine, that whine won't be there, that classic Hornet whine. But
the Navy Hornets that they're flying, they're pretty basic in many ways. Somebody was pointing out they were looking at cockpit 360 videos. I'm sure you've seen it, of the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds flying together. And somebody noted the Stratus, which is something that people fly around with in a Cessna 172, mounted to the glare shield of one of their Hornets.
Yeah, during the flyovers this last weekend, or Tuesday. Yeah, they said that's about the equivalent of an iPad, so it's...
Well, it's actually what talks to the iPad. So he probably had an iPad on his knee, and that's what I use for navigation in the Chipmunk. An iPad on my knee that talks to a Stratus that's mounted to the glare shield, and that's exactly what the F-18 pilot was using.
Okay, well, if that's everything, then I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for the night and give Farmer Man a chance for him to take the stage and everybody
Okay.
to head over to his show. So, once again, I
All
appreciate
right.
you being here, Mark. I know everybody in the chat appreciates it too. That everybody's saying thanks. So you have to go in there and
Good.
look at it after it gets uploaded here in
I
a
will.
few hours.
So thank you, Colin. It was a good show, and I love seeing your models there behind you. We've been
Definitely.
talking. Your
Oh, thank you.
Bearcat and your Zero and your Mustang.
Mhm.
All right. So y'all take care. Hope to see you at the Barn Burner Shootout.
Yep. Yes, sir. See you guys next week.